Let me introduce you to the fact that our former principal, Dr. Aruna Sitesh, had conceived of this idea of commemorating 75 years of college. What she had in mind was to do a calendar history of the college, which would run chronologically. But both Kalyani Datta and I thought that we would actually talk about women's education, women's role in national politics, and also the kind of obstacles which the women's education faced, how they were surmounted, and then of course a very brave event that we consider, that is the participation of the students of IB College in the national movement. Let me also add that when Dr. Sitesh decided to ask us to write a book, she also conceived of the idea of having the college archives. Our college then and now still is the only college in the University of Delhi to have its own archives. The process of it began in 2004, which was then inaugurated in 2006.
We were excited about it, and as she said, our idea was not to write just a straightforward year-wise chronological account. We wanted to see it in our college and its history in a wider context, in northwest India as it were. A lot of things were happening in Lahore, but in Delhi what happened was Delhi was a little, as she has mentioned in the book, a little conservative about this. So, and the other thing that is, yes, the chairman of the college at that time, Narendra, he was very keen on this project, and he had a house where all the archival material of the college from, as you might say, the year one had been preserved very carefully. I mean, that was by itself a story in itself. In cupboards, in beautiful handwriting, which was common in those days, everything was written down. You cannot imagine what a lot of wealth of sociological materials you can get from just a simple, attendance or admissions register. Which were the kind of castes which used to send students to the college, etc. So that part of it was, we spent, after classes, we used to go over to his house and spend hours looking through all the cupboards and taking out files and pictures, and carefully preserved, I suppose his father and his grandfather, who had also been trustees of the college, members, the founders, one of them was, had preserved beautiful cuttings from old newspapers, which are a wealth, give you a wealth of information about how Delhi was in those days, what was the composition of its populace, you know. So all that was very interesting.
To understand the evolution of the college, it would be important to see how actually we've preserved our documents and our pictures and the way we created the archives in 2006, and now of course this the 2006 archives got expanded into Museum and Archives Learning Resource Center. I'd like Dr. Vinita Sinha to tell us about the process of when we started working for the archives and how we actually put it together.
Hi, I'm Dr. Vinita Sinha. I belong to the English department at IB College. I've spent more than 3 decades now in the college, and even though I am not a student of the college, but in the process of building the archives, I must say that I got almost into the fold, you know, as if the college belonged to me more than just being a teacher here. Taking it further from what Meena just mentioned, that former late principal Dr. Sitesh, it was a very radical view and a very far-sighted view to take at that time with meager resources, to not only have the history written and released on the 75th anniversary of the college, but to take it further in the form of building the archives. We were able to carve out one space which is in the main building. We spent more than a year collecting photographs, and our major resource was none other than our late chairman, Sri Nationalist ji, as mentioned by my colleagues earlier, a storehouse of knowledge, and extremely proud of the possessions that he had. As Kalyani just mentioned, right from newspaper cuttings to photographs to any document that you speak of which is there in the display, the register where the names of the first students are mentioned, and so on and so forth, everything was derived from there. But the other part of it was where we got involved in sifting all of that and trying to tell the story on the wall. So it was a very careful choosing of photographs, where to begin from, right from our genesis in the old building, then the shifting to the next one, and finally where we are, the inauguration of the building, the first faculties, you can see them all on the wall, the first magazine, the handwritten magazine which was brought out by students of IB College. Then to display, we are extremely proud of our college building, and as you know, we've been declared a heritage building. So to show the college in different faces, the east view, the west view. Incidentally, some photographs were taken once again by our own late chairman, the aerial view of the college. However, this was done and we finally inaugurated it in March 2006. After that, the present principal had a greater vision of expanding the archives into a learning and resource center, which is where we are right now. And of course, things had improved with better resources, so the place became a little more than what we had actually thought of. Once again, as you can see, if you go around the archives, you can see how the whole story has been told on the wall. And the documents which are there, which are being displayed, are really worth a close look.
In the founding of this college, as well as down to the days of absolute fierce moments of independent struggle, in this college, in these institutions, both school and college, there has always been a strong stream of nationalism running through. The founders, when it was founded, I think women were not, it was a more, what would you say, patriarchal enterprise, whatever you might. In those days, they were the men who were interested. They were disciples of, followers of Annie Besant, believed in home rule, believed in theosophy, and were interested in establishing a school for girls from families which did not traditionally send their women to schools and colleges. So it took them it took a lot of effort to persuade families to send their girls to schools.
The college began in 1924 in the 2 rooms of the Haveli in Chippiwara, which were donated by Rai Balkrishnan Das. By profession, he was a banker, and he decided to donate this Haveli to start the school for girls in 1904. When the school began in 1904, it was actually a response to a very radical, aggressive speech of Annie Besant called the Education for Indian Girls. And this group of Rai Balkrishnan Das belonged to the Delhi Theosophical Society, and there were a group of them. The first principal of the college was Leonora Gomainer, an Australian. She had actually been invited by Annie Besant. She was her disciple. She was also a theosophist. And Leonora Gomainer came along with her niece
all the way from
Australia, O. James. Ms. O. James, she was put in charge of the Montessori school, and Leonora Gomainer became the principal of the college. One of the major contributions of Leonora Gomainer was her fight against the Parda. In that context, let me mention that Leonora Gomainer had a major role to try and stop the girls from leaving school. And she was quite happy because by the 1930s, the dropout range of the students had reduced remarkably. So these were the 2 things, the Parda and the dropout rate, which she tried to control. So as the number of the students went up, and also, we got a lot of students from North India. It was not just Delhi, but there were students coming from Jalandhar, Lahore, from the northern, from actually places in UP like Khurja. And I'm specially mentioning Khurja because one of the students of the first batch, 1924, Kalavati Gupta, who enrolled as the second student. The first student was Raj Dulari Sharma, who became the vice principal of the school. But Kalavati Gupta came from Khurja. She did history, she studied history in this college, and also went on to become a lecturer in the Department of History before she became the principal in 1934. So these were the different places where they came from, and they needed the residents as well. So they put tin sheds in the school in 2 rooms, which served as classrooms as well as the place where they would be staying. So it was in 1932, when the numbers became unmanageable, that they shifted to this place in Alipur, on Alipur Road, Chandravali Bhavan, which was actually a kind of a house, a bungalow, which was donated again by Rai Pyare Lal to serve as the school. But it was from 1926 onwards that Leonora Gomainer had been negotiating with the British government about the Alipur house, the place where we are actually located. Leonora Gomainer retired in 1934, but without any success in getting this place. Kalavati Gupta took up this, and it was only on 6th August 1938 that the government decided to give us this building for 2 lakhs. The school, the college management paid 2 lakh rupees, and 60,000 was given by the government. The college entered this building in October 1938, again 6th October 1938, but it was formally inaugurated on 7th February 1939 by Lady Linlithgow. And since then, of course, we've been in this building. It has now gone into become a heritage building. Whatever, we've kept our front facade as it is. There has been a lot of expansion, but all that expansion is towards the backside, and we've kind of expanded to, because the number of students now has gone up remarkably. I'd also like to mention Lala Jugal Kishore, the grandfather of our late chairman Sri Narayan Prasadji. He was one of the founder members. This group of Delhi theosophists got together to start the school for girls in 1904. As Kalyani mentioned earlier, that it was very difficult to get the girls out of their homes to study in the school. They prefer to be taught at home. But then it actually was, this school was called Indraprastha Hindu Kanya Shikshalaya. The use of the term Hindu is important, not in any communal sense, but it was a way of appealing to the community that they should send their daughters to this school where the Parda traditions, where their values would be preserved. And it was within a year or two, rather 1906 onwards, that we had students coming from the other communities. We had Christians, we had Muslims, we had Jains coming in. And as far as the Muslim girls were concerned, like again the Hindus who preferred that there should be a Panditani to teach them, they prefer Ustanis who would teach them at home. But by 1906, 1908, they realized that it was difficult to get Ustanis and that they could not be taught at home. So therefore, you know, the kind of confidence which this school gave to not only the Hindu community, but to the other communities to send their daughters to school is remarkable. And also what I may add is that while there were these girls coming in, there was no age bar. The girls could come to this school at any time, and what more importantly, Lala Jugal Kishore, whom I just mentioned, he persuaded his daughter-in-law to come to school in order to fight that resistance that married women could not go to school.
A lot of things change, and change is something that you see in this college, because in the beginning, as it has been written in the book, the families wanted their children, girls, to be taught in Hindi. They didn't want. That was part of, I suppose, the Swadeshi feeling which was running in them. But in a very few years' time, they wanted English to be taught. And the college had, I mean, the people who were looking after the college had quite a difficult time to find a teacher, a woman teacher, who would teach English. There was a lot of decisions taken by people in those days. In what one would seem are radical decisions. And there was a big controversy, of course, not only in India but also abroad about, okay, girls must be educated, but what should they learn? You know, what kind of subject? What is the curricula? Should it be just needlework, a little bit of language or something? One of the most interesting pictures, which people like a lot, is where there is a chemistry class going on. You may have seen that, where there is a male teacher standing and there are these girls who are science students, but all with their heads covered carefully. Because that was a mark of the time, you know, on the one hand, traditional Indian customs and social sense of their heads covered, but what they are studying is they are in a chemistry lab.
All students who came to this place were to study what they call literary. Literary meant that they must know their vernacular language. They all must Hindi, Urdu and Sanskrit. They should know. English was not the medium of instruction to make the girl students more comfortable. Then there was religious and moral teaching. Religious and moral teaching meant that they should know about their own community and they should know about their own religion. Then what they called was scientific study, basically science, which the focus was on hygiene, on health, etc. And then physical training, which is how they must exercise. And then of course there was arts, which they called arts and music. Music especially because they must know how to recite the shlokas, etc., the Sanskrit shlokas. So that was the beginning, that is what they were supposed to study. And then by the time we are into college in 1924, and then around 1926, 1928, the subject, the syllabus then changes, where of course they must know the vernacular language, Hindi and Urdu. They added Punjabi and Bengali. Then of course Sanskrit was one of the subjects. Apart from that, you know, they would do history, philosophy, economics. These were the subjects that were, and mathematics, very important mathematics. These were all added, apart from of course hygiene and music and needlework and embroidery, etc., which they had to learn, because they had to convince. There was this fear that if they are educated, and with this lot of influence of the British, they might just lose their so-called quote-unquote traditional values. Therefore, you know, they would always remind them that they must study, but not again quote-unquote become main sahibs. They must understand their domestic duties, and they must be able to make a home, etc. So these were the subjects which they started off with. And initially, of course, as again Kalyani had mentioned, English was not taught at all. But then very soon, when this became a college in 1924, by 1925, 1926, there was this demand that they want to study in English. Even before that, around 1916, 1915, when it was still a school, and the girls wanted to study English. So therefore the college management was very careful in case the parents think that it's being inflicted on them. So they decided to put a fee of 1 rupee whoever wanted to study English. And you know, in 1916 they also introduced the high school, etc., what they call the matriculation. And they started having these two mediums, those who wanted to study through vernacular and those who wanted to study through the English medium. So by the time we became a college in 1924, the syllabi had changed. There was keenness to study English. Of course, the fees was no longer just rupee 1. It gradually went on to be 12 rupees 12. You know, so that's how the college kind of kept growing. And talking about you know, these subjects which they were introduced to, including the hygiene, health, science, etc. See now what's happened in the 1970s. Looking at the demand for the change of subjects and the kind of subjects they wanted to study, commerce was introduced. In the 1990s, we started off by introducing a paper in a subject in BA program, which was computer applications, but now we have a full-fledged computer science department. And then of course IP College became the only college to have its own mass media course in 1999. So we have expanded, and why I'm talking of this is actually to also convey that how the college has stood by and has always met the demands of the kind of subjects or the kind of disciplines which the girls wanted to study. Although of course it's unfortunate that we could not become a science college, and our last batch of science was in 1929.
There was a lot of resistance to having male teachers, not even somebody who would teach Sanskrit. Sanskrit, it was very difficult to find a woman to teach Sanskrit. I don't know why that was so, probably because it was Dev Bhasha or whatever. So finally they had to appoint, with the concurrence of the parents, a Panditji to teach.
Although there was this resistance that they did not want men teachers and they were looking for a Panditani, but finally they got a Pandit. But there were 3 men teachers. They were called professors. Professor Ramadeva, who taught Hindi, Urdu and also Sanskrit. And there was Professor Nand Kishore, who taught music, and Rahman-ul-Nisa, who taught needlework and embroidery.
And itself is very interesting that there is a male to teach needlework, one would think is the preserve of women. Then when science was introduced in the Chippewa campus, they had to have male teachers for chemistry. When I entered as a student in the late 1950s, there were still 2 or 3 male teachers who were teaching. There was one teacher who was teaching Bengali and science and mathematics, and there was one for, I think, Urdu.
In 1937, when the university recognized the college as what they call the degree college, we only had BA pass till then, not honors. Honors was introduced in 1943. In fact, we made our admissions for BA honors in different subjects, English, history, psychology, all these other subjects in 1945, and also MA was introduced in 1945. So in 1937 they said that there should not be any male teachers, but of course the college management kept them. There were these male teachers, in fact till 1959, and
yes,
as she mentioned, there were 3 of them. 1959, one of them, which was Mr. Goswami, he was forced to retire. And one of them, another one who taught Urdu, was T.N. Zutshi, who passed away, who died. And then of course there was Professor Ramadeva again. He retired.
Circumstances rendered college with us all.
Yes, so either
female
forced
teachers.
retirement or T.N. Zutshi's death. That's how in 1959 was the last batch of these 3 male teachers. There was a big gap between that, and I think it's only in the early 2000s that we started having male teachers again.
I think it
on
would be a
board.
little later, because for me, they're coming back now. One new feature, a very interesting feature, is to see so many young
Yes.
male faculties.
Yeah, it all began in 2000, but now of course it's picked up now, and in fact you have, maybe if we were to calculate and see the ratio, in some departments there are more men teachers
That's
than
interesting.
women teachers. So it's really, now we've gone back and changed accordingly.
As far as faculties are concerned, it's unimaginable how far we have traveled, because there was a time, and not too far away too, but still before independence, where you cannot imagine that women teachers were paid far less. I think there was a percentage as compared to male teachers in the university. I mean, this was accepted. I mean, I cannot compass it. And I think it was, it's only when, yes, you know the date, when the equal salaries, they decided to pay equal. I mean, having been on the forefront of women's education, I mean, for teachers, working women as it were, to gain the right to have equal payment for work, equal payment for equal work, that is what we hear from USA as well, to achieve that.
One of the things about salaries, if I may add, one of the reasons why they did not want men teachers on the faculty was because of this disparity, and they thought that they would get women teachers and they would have to pay them more, and that disparity was there in 1937 when they were being asked to do that. Incidentally, it was Maurice Guire as Vice Chancellor who carried out this reorganization of the university, when it was he who introduced the idea of honors, BA honors. It was he who introduced the idea of 3-year degree course. And then, of course, the cooperative teaching, which is the college teachers can teach in the university departments. And it was he who actually laid down that even if you are employed in a college, but by Delhi University, by virtue of being the constituent college of Delhi University, you would be called a university teacher. So when he carried out this reorganization, there was this that why should then the women teachers be paid less than men teachers? What I'd like to mention, I'll give you a case of Nirmala Sherjung, a lecturer in the Department of Psychology. She actually there was no Department of Psychology, a separate Department of Psychology. It was a combined Department of Philosophy and Psychology. And those teachers who had studied philosophy were expected to teach psychology. So when the women teachers were recruited, they were supposed to sign a bond that they were not married. In other words, they did not hire married women for the kind of problems that it would be, that they would want to go on maternity leave, and if they went on maternity leave, it would disturb the classes, etc. Nirmala Sherjung was married, and she wanted a job. She was married to a political revolutionary who had been in jail for quite some time, and she was also pregnant at that time, but she hid the fact that she was pregnant for the fear of losing her job. But then, of course, she later told the principal. So Nirmala Sherjung then did not lose her job, and of course she had her child. But then the issue of maternity leave came up again in the case of another teacher, economics department, R.W. Ghatge, Mrs. Ghatge. She was pregnant. And when she applied for maternity leave, there was this big issue and there was this discussion that she could not go on maternity leave. In fact, it was with Mrs. Ghatge that this whole idea that, that maternity leave is required as far as women teachers are concerned, then began. So that was one aspect of the recruitment. The other aspect of the recruitment, which I would also like to mention, which kind of reflects on the radical spirit of the college and also on the principles of the college, is that when Nirmala Sherjung was recruited, she had to sign a bond that she will not participate in the national movement. But then Nirmala Sherjung participated. She went out on marches. She supported the students. And there was one incident when in one of the Prabhat Pheris, she was holding the mashal and she was in the front of the procession, and somebody happened to see her, who reported to the governing body, and then that governing body wanted the principal to take action against Nirmala Sherjung. The governing body's stand was that the person who reported that Nirmala Sherjung was in the procession was quote-unquote a responsible person. The principal, of course, talked to Nirmala Sherjung. Let me also add that the college management, they were so much under the British government's pressure, especially regarding the government grant, that they did not want the principal to investigate. They wanted a separate inquiry committee, but the principal insisted that she would talk to Nirmala Sherjung. And then she reported to the college management saying that the person who you hold responsible, who has been a complainant or somebody who's complained against Nirmala Sherjung, but for me, my teacher is a responsible person herself, and what she says is the truth. So that's how Nirmala Sherjung, of course, continued to be in service. She was not suspended, and she retired later. So, these are the kind of trends that we, of course, find in terms of recruitment or the different disciplines or their involvement in the national movement. Talking about the national movement, they were absolutely fearless. because in those days, participating in the national movement, which was seen as, of course, the anti-government activity, and the British government would want to curb it and would put a lot of restrictions. The major restriction that they would put was to stop the government grant. If we go into the history of the college, the college had always been in the midst of financial crisis from the very beginning. Mm-hmm. And they've had to either raise funds themselves or make their own endowment funds, so they were dependent on the government grants. But that deterred neither the students nor the teachers to take any stand in the national movement, which they were very active. So, we interviewed, in the process of writing this book, Women, Education and Politics, we interviewed some old students, some very old students of the 1940s. And it's interesting to note that, the Vice-Chancellor at that time was Maurice Guire. And he being the Vice-Chancellor, the students not only of Indraprastha College but throughout the university did not actually want him to be the Vice-Chancellor, and they would go and resist him and take out marches, etc. In the university. And another very interesting moment that I'd like to tell you is that when these girls went out to protest, or they jump the walls, go to Gandhi Maidan to listen to Gandhiji and Nehru, or they'd go and just go on a march to protest against the British government, or very, very actively participating in the 1942 Quit India movement, which had a lot of ramifications for the college, especially in terms of the grants. And one which I can mention to you is that the government stopped the ration, the wheat ration for the hostel, not only in the Trust Hostel, but also which was known then the Commercial College, which is now the Shri Ram College of Commerce, and the Ramjas College. So the wheat grant, the wheat ration for these three hostels were stopped. Despite that, the students did not give up. They had the college day coming in, their annual day coming in, so they organized their own college day, not depending on the government. There were lots of protests, there were lots of newspaper articles criticizing the government regarding this stopping the wheat ration, but the curb on the ration continued for 2 years, from 1943 to 1945. And as these students participated in the movement, there was this fear. They knew that they would be rusticated. And we have these several students from the 1940s who told us that, knowing very well that they would be rusticated, they still continued to participate. And they call themselves mini politicians who would organize meetings in the lawns of the college. They would picket the classes. And there were some students who even went up to Maurice Guire and appealed to him that although they have been a party to the movement and they have been in the marches, they have taken the anti-government stand, but that they should not be rusticated. Of course they were, and many of them were sent to jail. So they were quite happy to report to us what happened in the jail, and the kind of national pride that they still carried on in 2000s, in 2004 and 2003 when we interviewed them is remarkable.
Generally, I think because we are a little off campus on the way, I think there's a general view that we are, very what would you say, biddable kind of girls we produce, but that is not true. Anybody who knows about the college, that's it's just the very opposite. There's one little incident, if I might say, of how far in those days when people thought that women were the 40s, were very quiet, except for those who joined Mahatma Gandhi's program, was it seems that the girl guides and guides movement were having some kind of a meeting somewhere, and at the end of the program, the girls were supposed to salute the Union Jack and sing "God Save the King," etc., etc. They said, "We will not sing that thing. Why should God save the Queen? God should save everybody. And as per the King, you can leave our country." So I thought that was very interesting. Of course, they were, the government complained about them, but they were not punished.
And they called themselves Zinnia Petrol. Zinnia Petrol. And they used to go to Kingsway Camp for their training etc. And this was one of the things that they would, while they were learning about Girls Guide, they were supposed to, at the end of every exercise, they were supposed to salute the Union Jack. But instead of saluting every day without fail, they would say, not saluting, India Chhoro. India Chhoro, and that's how it would be. To this we may also add, I'll say something about the Indian People's Theatre, IPTA, again in the context of, the contribution of Sarla Sharma, because since we interviewed her, we know a lot of the kind of activities she was involved in. Most of IPTA plays were anti-government, and therefore the government would not give them a space to perform. They would not give them the mics. So they would use their own. They take a white sheet and they would take a takhat and make their own stage. But then how do they publicize? They were not allowed to publicize. They couldn't put posters because they were anti-government. So what they do was that, on the newspapers with black pen, they would write the name of the play, they would write the venue and stick them on the roads, so that as people traverse those roads or pass those roads, they would read those notices and then come for the play. The students of the 1940s, when the national movement, especially around the Quit India movement, the students, and I'm talking about IP college students, they made groups, and wherever they lived, they would be in charge of that particular locality. Say for instance Chandni Chowk or whatever, and then they take out marches. And what is more important is that they started wearing khadi, all girls, and they would spin the khadi themselves and wear that. So in connection to the Zinnia Petrol which I mentioned, these girls would take out marches and they would sing songs like Nahi Rakhni, Zalim Sarkar, Nahi Rakhni. So that was the extent of the national pride and the nationalism which we noticed in IP College.
In the 70s and 80s, when this anti-dowry movement, I think the faculty as well as students of the college had a lot to do that. There was at one point, Mita mentioned how during the, I think, times of the Nationalist movement, students used to meet and sit in the lawns. Well, that feature was enacted once again when, I think, during the 70s and 80s, when there was Sati, anti-Sati movement, and all of these anti-dowry movement, students after classes used to sit in the lawns and have discussions with also the Naxalite movement. There used to be very vigorous discussions in the lawns of the college. And were you referring to that? I think 70s.
Two of our teachers, once again from the English department, Dr. Sudesh Baid, who's very well known for her activities for PUDR. And along with her, Dr. Kumkum Sanghari, they brought out a very well-remembered book called Recasting Women.
Yes.
So this kind of, the radicalism of vision and expression has been a part of the college. And we are able to carry it so far, and I'm sure we'll be able to carry it further.
And then in the 1970s, as they both mentioned, there was this case about the eve teasing in the DTC buses, where again IP College was in the forefront. They were the ones who organized
Huge
this.
marches.
And also, in Deorala, when Roop Kanwar became Sati, the movement around that time, again IP College was in the forefront.
We called it the Heritage Calendar. Meena and I worked on it, and the theme which we decided on for this calendar was the firsts. So right from the first building to where we are, and then we chose to talk about the first principal, who was the Australian lady. Then we decided to bring out this photograph. He was the member of Rai Bahadur, Dr. Ram Kishore, Vice President and the first governing body, member of the first governing body. And it just went on. Again, the principal's photograph who came in. She was also from the first batch of students, Kalavati Gupta. Again, a teacher from the first faculty. So this became a very interesting one, and one more photograph which I may like to bring to your notice is that of Lautika Sarkar. Why I'm picking on this photograph is that we are talking about, you know, the very, very aggressive face of IB College. Lautika Sarkar, who is an alumna and who went on to become the first lady teacher in law faculty. Law faculty is not an easy place for women to survive.
To talk about feisty scholars, Lautika Sarkar, of course, one thing. We can talk about only the sister of Narayana Tiwari, Sarla Sharma.
Yeah, she's there.
She's still, she's still living. She was one of the very fierce trade unionists, I think, around the time. I mean, it was not very common. She's one of those political women, openly, very clearly. I mean, and the vice chancellor in her time was V.K.R.V. Rao, who was not very. She wanted to hand him, it seems. She stole some pamphlets about trade unionism, and he was refusing to take it. She said, "I'm going to stand here till you accept this from my hand. I want you to know about what we are doing today." So she was a very fierce trade union. And of course, to keep the link, then we have Aruna Roy. She is an ex-student of this college. So, I mean, these are just 3 names that she mentions. Aruna Roy was keeping up the banner, furling, as it were, as an activist who's done so much.